is finally set. The union budget will be presented on the 16th of March post the state elections. Now, this could be the UPA's make or break budget. The economy is going through a slowdown. The bureaucracy is in a state of paralysis, and corporate India is suffering from a bout of depression. Given his fiscal and political constraints, can Pranab Mukherjee change the mood of the nation? Will he present an agenda for growth or a statement of accounts? To discuss India Inc.'s expectations from Budget 2012, joining me in Mumbai, Adi Godrej, President Designate of the Confederation of Indian Industry. Also with us, Sunil Munjal, Chairman of CII's Economic Policy Council, Rajiv Memani, Chairman of CII's Task Force on GST Implementation, and Naresh Trehan, Chairman of CII's National Committee on Healthcare. Gentlemen, appreciate you joining us here on CNBC TV 18. Mr. Godrej, let me start by asking you, is this clearly going to be a make or break budget, and what do you think is going to be the one big idea as far as Budget 2012 is concerned?
I think this is going to be an extremely important budget because two things need to be done very strongly. One is to provide some incentives for the economy to grow. Secondly, fiscal balance must be maintained. So it will need more than just the budget. To my mind, the finance minister should work extremely hard to see that the goods and services tax is passed during the next financial year. The earlier, the better. The earlier it is passed, his fiscal position will be better. The other major thing he needs to do is to ensure disinvestment. Fortunately, the stock markets have recovered. Disinvestment could be a very good thing to look at in this budget. And most importantly, he needs to look at areas where reduction in tax rates could lead to, in fact, increased collections. There are many such areas. Surcharges should be got rid of. In certain cases, some rates can be reduced and collections could actually increase because it would spur economic growth.
But I want to pick up on the point that Mr. Godrej is bringing about, that there could possibly be, or there should be, a reduction as far as some taxes are concerned to actually boost revenue collection. Do you believe that given the fiscal room that he has, there is going to be any sort of a reduction in taxes, or do you actually believe that we are going to see a hike in taxes, especially on items like diesel vehicles as well as sin goods like cigarettes?
Yeah, I think diesel vehicles is, at least by what one reads and what's happening, I think it's likely that it may come. Cigarette is always the favorite, of, and comes up every year, so I'm sure they'll not miss on it this year. I'm not sure whether they'll have the room as much to reduce tax rates. But my sense is that they would be well advised to preserve and not increase the tax rates, whether in indirect tax or on the direct tax side. And if they can provide for some incentive, especially around investment allowance or something, which may not have an immediate impact but will encourage manufacturing, I think that will be great. But I think the key thing, one of the areas where he can augment, because I think it's important they also need to augment tax revenues, is to try and see there is a lot of money that's locked in disputes. And I think one of the focus areas or one of the thrusts could be to see how they can unlock the money that's stuck up in disputes.
Before we address any of those other issues, Ms. Memani, do you anticipate a hike as far as service tax is concerned? Because that's the big buzz and speculation at this point.
Well, I don't hope there is a hike. Hard to say what.
Do you expect? I didn't say whether you hoped for one. I said, do you expect a hike?
No, I don't expect. I don't think. I think if they try and bring in the negative list, then I hope there is no hike. So if they bring in the negative list, which looks quite likely, okay, I think they will stay away from those areas that are there in the state ambit. But I don't think that the service tax rates or the excise or the custom rates would be taken. I mean, even if you look at the GST, the mean rate, the central rate is around 10%. So I don't think they will hike it.
Okay, so you don't anticipate a hike in service tax, and of course there is a lot of talk on that negative list, and we are picking up that it will perhaps make it to Budget 2012. I'll come to you on the implications of the Vodafone case and the kind of provisions that we're likely to see in the budget on account of that. But Mr. Munjal, the big idea this time around could perhaps be the food security bill. Of course, there are question marks and apprehensions on how he's actually going to finance the food security bill. He hasn't been able to come up with the receipts on the disinvestment front. It is the first plan year of the 12th plan, and automatically we will see expenditure going up. But, you know, the food security idea, is that going to be the big ticket scheme this time around, you think?
I'm hoping he will surprise us and do more than just the food security, by the way. Because as you're aware, the CSO advanced estimates came out today, and the number they've given for GDP is 6.9, which by itself is along expected lines. But the worry is the agriculture, which they've said is likely to be 2.5%. And food security also means additional collection and distribution of food. It's not just a number. So on one hand is the fiscal requirement to be able to fund it. Second is the practical requirement of being able to grow and distribute this. And I think there's a serious amount of work which needs to be done on the agriculture policy, both in the states and at the center, whether it's getting them to agree to a model APMC Act, and a whole host of issues, land ownership, land transfers, around agriculture. I think there is serious work to be done. And as you said, if you're going to have a bill of this nature, we are going to have to find the resources to fund this as well. We have no fiscal headroom at present. So we need to create that fiscal headroom. And I partially agree with what Rajiv just said. We will also need to widen the tax base, not just keep the rates at where they are or lower them for better compliance, but we have no choice but to widen the tax base as well. So we will have to work on both ends.
Okay, so the food security is one aspect, but in terms of the reform agenda, do you expect this budget to address any of those? Because as far as FDI and multi-brand retail is concerned, what we're picking up is that that's not going to be an issue that he's going to want to address in the budget, and it doesn't really need to be addressed by way of the budget. But just from an intent point of view, an articulation of the government's economic intent, what do you think he's going to prioritize and focus on?
See, one of the things which has happened this year is they've moved the date of the budget to be post the elections, state elections.
Yeah.
And since state elections will be over, I do expect he may not make any single big bang announcement, but I think of the number of issues which are pending, he's going to pick up chunks of those and make those as announcements in the budget, which is why I'm saying I'm hoping for a positive surprise, not just one, but I think we will see more than one announcement come in this budget.
Okay. Dr. Threin, let me come to you, because, you know, the healthcare sector had a little bit of a disappointment that was sorted out then eventually post the budget last year. This time around, what are you anticipating in terms of the social sector focus as far as the government is concerned? Because clearly it's going to be big on the agenda.
See, Sharon, first thing is very clear to everybody that we have a huge ground to cover as far as providing healthcare to our citizens is concerned. It's actually dismal right now. So we know that we need to double the healthcare delivery system and make it more affordable at all levels. So with that in mind, there are three things that which are the key points that we have asked for. One is that to be able to stimulate the creation of capacity, that the government should provide us infrastructure status, which the finance minister had already alluded to in his speech in the parliament, and then said that the finer points or the details will be announced later, which hasn't happened so far. So we have requested the finance minister this year again that please spell it out clearly so that we know that people will get encouraged to create more and more capacity, which is very sorely needed. In fact, we are far behind. Second thing we have asked for is that we should have more doctors and paramedical personnel, which also we need to double the capacity. Today we are producing anywhere around 25,000 doctors, and we need to double it to 50,000. So we actually need to modify the rules of creation for medical schools and other paramedical facilities, and gap funding provided for that, to be able to actually in the coming years be able to accomplish that, which is necessary for us to be able to deliver the healthcare that the nation needs. Three is the point that we want that the insurance sector should be pushed forward. We should be able to come up with programs or products which will enhance the RSBY scheme, which is already there on the ground for below poverty line people. We'll need to enhance that scheme, and we need to come up with PPP models which will make it possible to deliver care at that level in rural areas and semi-rural areas. So these are things that are actually pending for for a long period. So overall it means that the budget for healthcare allocation this year, which was 26,000 crores last year, needs to be at least doubled so that we can in coming years make up for all the years that we ignored healthcare to the people.
I was just going to say that at least for the last couple of years, I've been reading out exactly this list of demands, infrastructure status for the healthcare sector, but once again has been pending. Let's see if this year the finance minister will deliver. But Mr. Godrej, I want to come back to you, and I want to pick up on the point that Mr. Munjal made, that he's delivering this budget after the 5 states are over and done with their elections. The verdict will be out. Do you believe in that scenario he's going to have a little more room to perhaps move on things like subsidies? Diesel deregulation, for instance. Do you believe that we are going to see a decisive move towards cutting down subsidies this time around?
There won't be a better time for him to do that immediately after a major election is over. So I expect that will come in this budget. I expect a lot of subsidies will be rationalized. And as you rightly put it, there are certain items on which excise increases like diesel cars or cigarettes is very likely to my mind. Also, there are some opportunities to increase import duties in some cases. For example, I know a case in the vegetable oil business where both Indonesia and Malaysia are subsidizing their value-added manufacturers. Clearly, we need to react to that, and that can create for considerable additional revenue. Another suggestion I have for the finance minister, which is a little out of the ordinary, is that the budget is generally like a profit and loss statement. He needs to publish a balance sheet of the government and mark it to market. He may not be able to do it right in this budget, but he should make an attempt to do it so that the government knows, we know exactly what is the valuation of all the government assets, so that a liquidation program can be worked out over a 5-year period. They are tremendous, whether it's government-owned land, government-owned public sector projects, etc. And I think this investment can be a major source of revenue over the next 2 or 3 years to balance.
But Mr. Godrej, I just want to pick up on the point of disinvestment, because if you look at what's happened this year, and of course we can blame the market conditions and so on and so forth, but it's not only on account of the market conditions. You have public sector companies who are not interested in going down the FPO route. You have public sector companies who are opposing any form of disinvestment at this point in time. We've seen how the government has arm-twisted public sector companies into hiking disinvestments to bridge the fiscal deficit. We now have the possibility of an auction route to bridge the fiscal deficit and to get more money by way of disinvestment receipts. But there is opposition from public sector companies to go down the disinvestment path.
No, I don't think there was an opposition to disinvestment. It was an opposition to buyback of shares, which means you affect the cash of the public sector companies, which is required for growth. I think if the government
there was an opposition to buyback. There was an opposition to buyback, but there was also an opposition to a follow-on public offer. For instance, SAIL very publicly stated it wasn't interested in doing an FPO at this point in time.
Yes, but that was a time when the stock market condition was such that an FPO would be difficult. In today's stock market, which has improved considerably since the 1st of January, it can be considered. And in the next financial year, perhaps they will get times where that could be done. In fact, they wait too late for the disinvestment. It should be done early in the fiscal year when the stock market conditions are good. For example, in April-July period, there could have been a lot of disinvestment successfully.
Rajiv Memani, I want to push forward with what is being speculated about at this point in time, that post the Vodafone ruling, we are actually going to see the government move towards the guard-like provisions, perhaps in this budget itself. What are you picking up, and do you anticipate that happening?
Yeah, Shireen, I'll answer to that. I think the only other thing that I just want to go to the previous question, where I think the government can also do, is that they're, in the earlier round of disinvestment that happened, they're still holding minority stakes in some of those companies, and they are now quite valuable. So that is not linked to the market. I'm surprised that the government is not pushing the pedal on that, because that can release significant amount and help them, come very close to their disinvestment targets.
You're talking specifically about Balco and Hindustan Zinc, aren't you, Rajiv Memani?
And there are 2-3 other companies as well. So if you go through that list, those are the two, and there are 2-3 other companies as well. So I'm surprised that they are not pushing the pedal on that. So that's a question mark, at least in my mind, as to why they're not pushing. Coming on the Vodafone issue, I think you're right. I think this has been, the government has taken this as a setback, is viewing this as a setback. And there was first some apprehension that they may want to bring in something that is retrospective, but I don't think that's very unlikely, given the fact that the Supreme Court has delivered a very clear verdict, and I don't think they would want to take on the verdict of the Supreme Court. And I think in a sense the judgment was really that they understood the intent, but what Azadi Bachao or this decision have always said is the statute doesn't support what the government is intending to do. So they may bring in some guard-like provisions. They may not bring in more stringent anti-avoidance rules. They may bring in limitation of benefit clauses around the Mauritius Treaty. But the downside of bringing that also is that means, and which is why the government has always been hesitant in doing that. There are a string of other cases that are likely to come up, and then it pretty much establishes that the earlier provisions did not support what the government is intending.
Okay, that's what we're picking up as well. But Sunil Munjal, infrastructure is likely to be another area of focus as far as Budget 2012 is concerned. Tax concessions as far as infra bonds are concerned, the infra debt fund, clarifying certain issues with regards to the infra debt fund. Perhaps those will be areas of that he would like to clarify. But, things like the power sector, which at this point in time, the picture looks absolutely abysmal. Now the Prime Minister's office trying to take charge of that situation. On infrastructure specifically, what do you see the Finance Minister saying this time around?
I think we've seen 2 or 3 successful bond issues in recent times. I think they will certainly take advantage of that and push more and more of the infrastructure companies and public sector companies to move in that direction. I also think, and I'm going back again to the question which Rajiv went back to, on disinvestment. We have 3 different options right now. One, of course, is the minority stake entities, and there are other non-strategic businesses that the government is still invested in which it could easily cash out. And third, even if they don't cash out completely from equity, there are huge assets like land banks sitting in many of these companies. And those can certainly be in cash.
But Mr. Munjal, I come back to my fundamental question. I mean, corporate India seems to have adopted this mindset where the fiscal deficit should be bridged by way of divestment. But fundamentally, I mean, that can only take us so far. He has to look at revenues, streams that generate revenue. Disinvestment can only go so far, can only take us so far.
No, I don't think there's an argument there, Shireen, which is why at the start I think I didn't get a chance to answer your first question that Adi was answering. To my view, he has to do all 3 things in his budget. He has to find a way to push for growth. He has to find a way to prune expenditure, and he has to increase revenues by widening the tax base. And it's not as if he can do one at the cost of the other. There's no option. You have to do all 3 of them, and which willy-nilly means looking at subsidies once more sharply. You cannot eliminate subsidies. Okay, that's accepted now. They are required. You can target them better. With Aadhaar getting rolled out, I think certainly you have the tool available. And if the intent is there, I think it's certainly possible now to have a much sharper focus, even doing dual pricing of products, which we've always discouraged because it leads to mischief with specific
but CII is actually recommending dual pricing of diesel. CII is actually recommending dual pricing of diesel. Is that really practical?
It's now, this is exactly the point I'm making. Now it is possible. When you have individual identity which you cannot change, especially if it's locked in with biometrics, then you can do these things. Then use these tools. That's what these are for. The earlier problem was the extreme leakage and almost mismanagement of some of these systems. And the amount of money which was going in was actually certainly not reaching the target audience.
Sunil Munjal, wrap-up comments from you. Don't give me a wish list. Tell me what you really think. Stick your neck out. Tell me what you really think he's going to be able to deliver.
I think he is going to focus on growth, because the reality today is, unless you get growth, you're not going to generate revenue. And as you said, unless you have additional revenue, none of the schemes that we're talking about are going to be possible to implement. So he has to find a way to focus on growth, whether it's through additional investment allowance kind of schemes, whether it's additional depreciation, accelerated depreciation on R&D being extended to all activities. And there is a whole host of activities which are possible to do, which will create growth. So we have to be able to be able to give out funds to allow growth. And the government is not giving this up. It's coming from the additional revenue which will get created. And that then will allow us to run some of the social schemes in the manner that we would like them to see. At the same time, we are a bit wary. We don't want bits and pieces of things like DTC coming into this budget without all of this being comprehensively looked at, because the impact of this can be fairly significant, which is why we said DTC must come only if and when GST comes. And we hope GST comes this year. If not with the budget, which seems unlikely, certainly by October of this year.
Rajiv Memani, the hope is that DTC and GST should come in together, but what we are picking up is that some aspects of the DTC and some aspects of the GST may come through this time around. He may make the transition towards both. Is that your sense?
No, I think they will respect, I think the Empowered Committee will be about to give their report. So I have a feeling they'll respect what's the role that the Empowered Committee is going to play. So I'm hopeful that unless it's something which is very, very critical, that the provisions within the DTC will not come.
Adi Godrej, I'm going to leave the final word with you. As we go into this budget, are you going into it with tempered expectations, or do you have high hopes?
No, I have good hopes from the budget. I think it must be growth oriented, as Sunil mentioned. There's no alternative. And I think there is a very strong probability of him trying to bring the balance in the budget, the fiscal balance that is required through a combination of disinvestment. Service tax will be expanded to make it into a negative list, so that there will be much greater collection of service tax in the next fiscal. And I think he will have to reduce some subsidies as has been planned but not implemented in this fiscal.
Right. Well, as all our panelists are saying, we do hope that the budget brings in a balance, but we also hope that the budget doesn't pull off another great Indian rope trick. My many thanks to our panelists for joining me here on the CNBC TV 18 special. We'll check back with you when the Finance Minister does present the Union budget on the 16th of March. Till then, from all of us here, goodbye and many thanks for watching.